English translation 360th contact. Friday, 4th June 2004. EU021 hours.
Wait, my friend. The door in Eva's office is yet to be closed as I left it open because I thought you would be late. Barbara has already asked me on her night watch if I will leave the office again, just because of the open door. I will just be quick then, so that is done. Well, it is unfortunate that there were delays in our correction work with Bernadette tonight. It is incomprehensible to me why whole sections and simply parts of sentences were missing in the computer transmission. In my computer everything is stored, and also in all printouts everything is complete. Silvano, Bernadette, and I have already checked that.
It is really regrettable because such incidents delay our work together. Unfortunately, Zafanat Paneach has not had time to check on your computer equipment. However, I feel the need to convey to him the desire to concern himself with your computer device in the near future.
Thank you. Hopefully this will clear up all the mess. Well, can I ask you what unsaturated fatty acids do for muscle and if there is really a connection?
Among the Una.
Oh, I am glad to see you, my child. I did not know you were also here. Be welcome.
I am glad I could surprise you. It was my wish that Ta not inform you of my visit. The pleasure is also mine to see you. Be embraced, greeted, and come.
That is indeed so, my friend Edward.
Our friendship, you know.
Thank you.
I would like to ask you two very private questions. Although I have already spoken to Ptah about this and received advice from him, he thinks that I should also ask you.
If I can be of any help, I am at your disposal.
Thank you. Those are the two questions I would like you to consult on.
A little difficult, but I would like to consider the following solution to your first question. As to your second question, I think that you...
It is simply amazing. You listened to me, and even before I have finished my questions properly, you have already prepared your advice. Which is equally astonishing. Almost literally, you gave me the same two pieces of advice as Ptah. It is truly astonishing. Thank you, dear friend, thank you. You two are very wise and my best fatherly friends. Now I will go and leave you alone again. I still have various tasks to perform that are waiting to be completed and which I cannot postpone. Goodbye!
One moment, please. Look here, these three products, a shower gel, a shower oil, and moisturizer for the skin are named after your name. As far as I am concerned, I did not know that name was known on Earth. The products are manufactured by Florina Cosmetic GmbH Inc. C. in Germany in 04734 Waldheim. There is also an internet address, www.florina.
Amazing! I also did not know that my name is known on Earth.
These things were given to me as a gift. Maybe you can use them?
No thanks, I have no use for them. Now I really must go, no! Just a moment, I remember something. You told me some time ago that you wanted to explain to me what is actually meant by spiritual healing, because I am not familiar with the term.
This term is wrongly used by the humans of Earth. But let Edward explain it to you.
I would like to do that, although Ptah could probably do it better than me.
Do not hide your light under the bushel, my friend.
All right. Then let me explain. Spiritual healing is a completely wrong term used by the Earth humans to describe consciousness power healing. Lay.
Excuse me for interrupting you, because as far as consciousness power healing is concerned, of course I know what it is, I just do not know how it works. If you want to explain this to me? Unfortunately, I have not yet dealt with these matters to the extent that I would be aware of them.
Ptah, do you not want to explain?
The honor is yours, my friend, because Florina does not want to hear my explanation, but yours.
Yes, that is my desire, although I know that Ptah could also explain everything to me, because he is well versed in these things.
So be it. Very well then. So the term spiritual healing is completely wrong because there is no such thing. But what corresponds to reality is the consciousness power healing, which is done by the power of the consciousness. But it is not only the power of the consciousness of the person performing the consciousness power healing that heal or alleviate the illness or pain of the sick or suffering person. The powers sent out by the healing person consist merely of unconscious or conscious telepathic suggestive impulses for healing or alleviation, which are in any case unconsciously received by the ill or suffering person, but which also occur equally in animals and plants, which are receptive to such unconscious or conscious human impulses. If, however, a tingling, reddening, bleaching, itching, stinging, burning of the skin, or a feeling of cold or warmth, etc. occurs, then this is not triggered by the telepathic suggestive impulses, but solely by the strong imagination of the person being treated. And because unconscious or conscious telepathic suggestive impulses are transmitted by the person who heals with the power of consciousness into sick and suffering people, they become subject to an unconscious suggestive influence which triggers self-healing through their own powers of consciousness, whereby an illness is cured or pain is alleviated. This happens equally to animals and plants, but via their instinctive consciousness. And since these telepathic suggestive impulses are transmitted at the speed of light, so-called remote healings can therefore also take place without the knowledge of the suffering or sick person that such impulses are directed at them. But the rule with human beings is that healings of the powers of consciousness are used consciously, whereby then, of course, the belief in it plays a decisive role. If the ill or suffering person knows that he or she is being treated by a consciousness healing person, then belief in it immediately causes the imagination to react, and to such an extent that pain is dissolved or an illness is actually cured. This happens, however, through the self-healing powers that are generated by belief and imagination through one's own powers of consciousness. And that this is really so can even be scientifically proven, as Quetzal once assured me. It has to be said that no healing of the spirit can be done by the spirit itself, because the form of the spirit or the spirit energy is absolutely neutral and does not carry out any actions. This is in complete contrast to material consciousness, which is constantly active, even in sleep. So it is the consciousness of the human being that can and does carry out actions, and therefore powers are generated by the consciousness alone, which simply work telepathically, suggestively, or even telepathically suggestively. If a healing of the power of consciousness takes place in a human being, then this takes place, as already mentioned, through the unconscious or conscious telepathic suggestive impulses, which however only have a stimulating function for the self-healing of the sick or suffering person, and therefore are not able to bring about a healing themselves. So in this respect, there is only a function for triggering self-healing. Once again, healing of the powers of consciousness is affected by one's own powers of consciousness of the sick or suffering person himself or herself, whereby the powers are generated by the belief and imagination of the sick or suffering person and bring about self-healing. In contrast, the person of the power of consciousness healing, erroneously called spiritual healer, achieves the development of the powers of consciousness in the sick or suffering person through an unconscious and uncontrollable, or through a conscious and controllable impulsive suggestive radiation, which is generated by the consciousness and not by the spirit. The consciousness healing person is able to generate his or her suggestive impulses and their effect both through their presence alone or through their speech, and to transmit them to the sick and suffering, but also through the whole body or through the palms of the hands and fingers, through which the impulsive and healing suggestive radiation is particularly effective. The person who heals with the power of consciousness is therefore not able to produce any healing powers of their own, but only the corresponding unconscious or conscious impulse suggestive healing impulses or suggestive swinging waves, through which the self-healing powers are mobilized in the sick or suffering person, in humans, animals, and plants. In humans, as already mentioned, belief and imagination usually play a decisive role. This belief and imagination need not even occur in the sick or suffering person himself or herself, because it is enough that relatives, friends or acquaintances, etc. fall for the belief and imagination, because with it they transfer their own suggestive swinging waves to the sick and suffering person, whereby the suggestive impulses are absorbed by them, which stimulate self-healing. And the stronger the suggestive swinging waves or suggestive impulses are, by which the sick and suffering are unconsciously hit, the more intensive they become effective in the person affected by illness or suffering. Finally, it must be said that the mere belief or imagination of the sick and suffering person is sufficient for self-healing or pain relief, if the power of the person is believed in, who acts as a consciousness healer. However, even the belief or strong imagination of the person practicing consciousness power healing is sufficient, because through belief or imagination, such a strong suggestive swinging wave is built up, which is transmitted to the sick or suffering person, and acts on him or her in such a wise that self-healing is triggered, or simply relief is produced. The principle can be compared with the placebo effect, where belief and imagination alone can trigger the healing or alleviating effect. Thus, the healing of the power of consciousness, wrongly called spiritual healing, is a purely psychological moment, even if this is generally disputed by experts and wrongly tried to be explained as healing by the power of the spirit. Spiritual healers are attributed special spiritual and divine gifts and powers, which of course is nonsense, because they are effectively only normal powers of material consciousness. In reality, these are normal people who have the ability, consciously or unconsciously, to build up very strong suggestive swinging waves in themselves, which they can transmit to other human beings, also to animals and plants, unconsciously or consciously telepathically and impulse suggestively, even over very long distances, whereby these suggestive impulses trigger a self-healing process at the destination. Due to the power of the suggestive swinging waves, it is not necessary that the sick and suffering person concerned know anything about the actions of the person who is active in the consciousness power healing, because the suggestive swinging waves, which are transmitted with lightning speed, also work unconsciously and subconsciously, so sick and suffering ones do not have to know about them. The whole thing can be further strengthened by the fact that relatives of the sick and suffering also participate in the belief and imagination to produce self-healing or relief, which often happens when spiritual healers are secretly hired for an expensive fee to provide health care to loved sick and suffering people. This is roughly what can be explained.
Your explanation should be sufficient and understandable enough. It is in accordance with our knowledge.
You have my gratitude, dear friend. I have your declaration on record and I will keep it. But now I really want to go. Goodbye and thank you again.
Then take care. It is a shame that you cannot use the Florina items, which, if I remember correctly, Wolfgang Froese, a FIGU member, brought me. He sends his best regards to you. Salome, my child, and goodbye.
Florina's coming interrupted me in my answer regarding unsaturated fatty acids. In short, unsaturated fatty acids strengthen the muscles, which allows great muscular performances to be achieved, such as work, walking, running, and swimming, etc.
I had not thought of my question in that regard. Thanks for your explanation. Then I have another question regarding the Nebra disc. You may remember that Ketzel told me about it in the 80s. He told me at that time that he did not know the exact origin of the materials, but that he was pretty sure that the disc, which is actually a Celtic blood sacrificial vessel, was made of copper from copper mines in Austria, while the gold that had been worked in or processed was mined in Romania about 3,600 years ago. That is how old the vessel is supposed to be. Could you perhaps say something more about this?
I can only confirm Quetzal's information. I am unfortunately also not aware of anything more, which is why I cannot give any further information about it.
Pity.
We are not omniscient either, my friend.
Of course not. Nor have I ever assumed that. It would have been interesting if you had known something else. But it is amazing that you know so much about the existence of the sacrificial vessel.
We have studied Celtic history and have a lot of records about it. We only have no knowledge about how the metals were mined and how the sacrificial bowl was made.
It is not that important. It was just a question. An answer would have been very interesting for me.
Asai, I unfortunately cannot be helpful.
Never mind, it is not that important. Look here, Ptah, I have a newspaper article that appeared in the Tagesanzeiger 2 days ago on Wednesday, June 2nd. I am interested in your commentary on it.
Ptah reads article.
I can only respond to that with the typical Quetzal response. It is of correctness, because unfortunately, what is described here corresponds to reality. Of course, there would still be a lot to explain, but what is said in this article should be enough, because further explanations would require a treatise in all contexts.
That would certainly be very interesting, but it would probably all lead too far, and would not be understood professionally by laypersons, including myself. But in any case, thanks for your answer. But I still have a question regarding the monkeys. Some time ago, I read something in a journal about how these creatures fight and kill each other, as I could already observe in my youth together with Svath in Africa, when he once flew there with me to show me a monkey war, which he knew through foresight. In which journal the article was, I unfortunately do not remember. Also, Simyase and Quetzal were kind enough to let me see such monkey wars twice, which they, like Svath, were able to time by a foresight so that we were at the right place at the right time. I also saw several times with monkeys how these fights fought among themselves, and even until death. Individual monkeys were brutally maltreated, beaten, bitten, killed, and even eaten by a whole pack, not only in relation to other species, but also in relation to their own species. Now it is repeatedly stated by zoologists, etc., that animals do not usually kill each other, but that this only happens in rare cases, which now leads to the fact that researchers and zoologists are confused and think that they have to revise their assumption. However, as I was taught by Svath, it is indeed the case that animals do indeed fight among themselves, especially when there are territory violations or during rutting, apart from the lions, etc., where the males kill foreign offspring when they enter a new herd of females and take over the dominion over them. However, turf wars and rutting fights of the animals do not usually serve to kill the opponent, except in rare cases, because normally these power struggles are only given to drive the adversary away. And only if the opponent cannot be taught any better, and thus does not become of the mind to flee or give up, do the rivalry and the turf wars and rivalry fights take on dangerous forms, whereby under certain circumstances the whole thing can also end fatally. This, however, always according to the animal genus and its species, and this in the wild, which has nothing to do with the fact that animals kill each other through the fault of humans, because they are trained for this purpose. But the fact that monkeys kill and eat each other and even wage real monkey wars and commit murders, in which clubs, stones and lianas, woody vines, etc. are used as striking weapons. In addition to the fact that the animals bite into each other and fatally injure and tear each other apart with their dangerous bites while still alive, has nothing to do with rivalry and turf wars. In fact, it is true that all genera and species of monkeys are, in certain masses and factors, human-like and wild, as well as unpredictable in their mood-based excesses, etc., and this also indeed applies to the relationship between the killing of like ones, to them, of their species, and different ones, as is also peculiar to humans. And regarding those who are different, I have observed on my travels that monkeys have also caught and eaten amphibians, as well as beetles, insects, birds, etc. For my part, as you know, I also had a half-grown mountain gorilla in Africa, which I had received from the natives as a reward for bringing back the youngest son of the village chief, who had lost his way far from the village and could not find his way home and was not found by the searchers. Both of us, the gorilla and I, got used to each other quickly, and he accepted me as master after we had a huge fight with each other, and he was defeated. Unfortunately, he was then shot by the police with machine guns as a result of a stupid misunderstanding when a young German woman irrationally tried to approach the gorilla when I led him through the city on a chain, which of course then attacked the woman. I learned a lot from this primate in terms of the behavior of these creatures, as well as from the two rhesus monkeys, a large and a small one, which I had in India at the Ashoka ashram in Mehrauli, and which I took with me to Switzerland when I once returned home. And now that all monkey creatures carry within them some traditional factors of human character, since these creatures are descended from the original lineage of humans, it is not surprising that they are capable of killing, both in terms of their own genus and species, as well as in terms of other life forms. In this respect, monkeys are very strikingly similar to humans, which is not surprising, since these creatures originate from the human lineage. The fact that human being on the whole no longer behaves in the same kind and wise as the apes, and that they no longer kill in the same manner as these, but has just become more human, with exceptions, is solely due to their conscious thinking, the development and use of their conscience and morality, and the perception of general responsibility. Excluded from this are only those human creatures that are still very badly out of control of their good human nature at the foundation of their character, that kill and torture without hesitation, etc., regardless of whether they are ordinary citizens or military personnel. And in this respect, I think this is the crux of the matter, that namely, since ape creatures have more or less human factors in their behavior and are incapable of distinguishing between good and evil and between negative and positive, just as they have no trained conscience and know no conscious responsibility and evolution, they act only instinctively, uncontrollably, and impulsively, etc. So they act identically as humans did before they cultivated, evolved, and became aware of their conscience and responsibility. After all, apes and humans originally came from a primordial lineage from which the first primates emerged. While most ape creatures remained in their primacy, a few forms changed into actual hominids, from which the first earthly humans emerged. Therefore, a very strong distinction must be made between primates and hominids, because primates are and remain wild, instinct-driven, impulsive ape creatures, which are not capable of thought and feeling control, have no conscious conscience, and have no command over conscious responsibility. This is in complete contrast to humans, about half of whom have already evolved to such an extent that they are able to successfully defend themselves from all Ausertungen, the getting very badly out of control of their basic good human natures. The other half still allows primate traits here and there, whereby a larger number is always ready to live out any kind of Ausertungen, including murder and other killing. That is how I see and understand everything.
What you say corresponds to reality. By paraphrasing this, you have also explained the fact that ape beings are not animals, but pure primates. Primates, however, are very different from animals, which do not contain any human factors.
Svath, Simyase, and Quetzal already said that. Monkeys are pure primates and should not be compared to animals or humans.
That is correct. The term primate was taken from the old Lyran term primaton, which means first being. Also, the term human, which means man, originates from the old Lyran language and was integrated into the earthly languages. It is completely wrongly handed down that the term should originate from early or late Latin, etc., because the true origin lies thousands of years ago, namely with the old Lyran emigrants who left their home worlds for war reasons and settled on the earth for some time, only to emigrate again later. So when the late Latin explanation for primates is described as a member of an order of mammals or master animals comprising humans, apes and prosimians, then this corresponds to an unforgivable falseness and falsification in terms of including humans. First of all, the human being is not a primate being, which only commands over an instinctive consciousness and not over a conscious evolutionary consciousness. Thus, they humans cannot be designated as a primate being. And secondly, the term human clearly and unequivocally states that they are a human being with a conscious consciousness, so that conscious evolution is also given to them. And what still has to be explained in principle, in the origins of the development of primate beings, their form of consciousness was such that their consciousness was oriented towards a conscious evolutionary consciousness, as well as towards a form of instinct consciousness and impulse consciousness. Early on, however, a strong evolutionary separation took place, whereby only a single species retained its three forms of consciousness and made them evolutively into a single consciousness group, from which the species human or human being emerged. In contrast to this, the conscious evolutionary consciousness of all other primate beings decayed, so that they fell into instinct consciousness alone and were no longer capable of conscious evolution, as has remained the case with the human Wesen or human being. Thus, the ape beings are distant, degenerated descendants of the first beings, whose evolutionary line was determined by the conscious evolutionary consciousness to become a human Wesen and thus ultimately a human being. Through their degeneration of the forms of consciousness, however, the primates remained such, and thus became the so-called monkeys, who only have an instinctive consciousness, which is, in a certain wise, capable of learning instinctively and impulsively, as is also the case with many other beings who have an instinctive consciousness. And finally, it must be explained that on all worlds in the universe that bear higher and high life, the evolutionary course to human or the incarnation through evolution is the same, and consequently primate beings or first beings arise everywhere, from which on the one hand, the genus human develops through further evolution, while the remaining first beings fall victim to a degeneration of the form of consciousness and thus remain primates or become ape beings, as they are called by the terrestrial human being.
Thank you for that explanation, which I did not expect. But if you still have some time, I would like to ask some more questions.
If there are not too many of them?
No, actually only 3. First of all, I would like to know when the cat originally became a pet among terrestrial people, because it is always taught that the domestic cat, which is descended from the wild cat, especially from the Nubian falb cat, which is widespread in Egypt and Nubia, and which was given the Latin name Felis sylvestris libica, as I know from the encyclopedias. In the 3rd or 2nd millennium BC, the cat was domesticated in Egypt and Asia Minor. In contrast to the great diversity of breeds in dogs, this is much smaller in domestic cats. What is also interesting to mention, when I was recently interested in the origin and history of cats, I learned that domestic cats differ in their pattern, coloring, and coat, but also in their body shape and size. And in contrast to the big cats, the real cats, which have the Latin name Felidae and can roar, the domestic cats can only meow and purr. The doctrine is that cats, Felidae, are a family of land predators with highly specialized dentition, bouncing hind legs and retractable claws on the paws, with the cheetah being an exception. They also have excellent hearing and good eyesight. They also have a sense of touch due to the tactile hair on their head. Recently, the real cats with 2 genus groups, and the cheetahs, whose Latin name is Acinonychinae. Further, I learned that all species belonging to the big cats have an elastic band instead of the ossified intermediate branch of the hyoid bone, and therefore can roar and purr only when breathing out. But the snow leopard is an exception. To the others belong, among other things, the lion and the tiger, as well as the leopard and the jaguar. In contrast to the big cats, the small cats possess a completely ossified hyoid bone, through what they cannot roar but can only purr when breathing in and breathing out. Almost 30 species belong to this group, reaching a body length of up to about 100 centimeters, although the puma surpasses all of them with up to 180 centimeters. In addition to the wildcat, lynx, ocelot, and serval belong to this group. A distinction is to be made between the common domestic cat and pedigree cats, the latter being divided into long-hair breeds and short-hair breeds, which often occur in several varieties or colors. Persian cats, Burmese cats, Turkish cats, and Khmer cats, that is to say color point cats, belong to the long-hair breeds. And to the short-hair breeds belong the European short-hair, the Oriental short-hair, the Siamese, the Abyssinian, the Burmese, Korat, Russian blue, and Rex. The breeding maturity of the pedigree cats is indicated with 10 to 12 months, whereby the gestation period is between 63 and 65 days, and with the Siamese cat with 67 days. Between 3 to 6 kittens are born per litter, which are deaf and blind at first, and open their eyes only after 8 to 10 days.
This is indeed a direct short course that you give. You have learned very well, but the information regarding this is not correct. That in the 3rd or 2nd millennium the domestic cat was domesticated, because according to our research findings, the first wild cats were tamed by terrestrial humans for the first time 17,862 years ago, and kept in human dwellings. The real reason for taming the animals was to keep the dwellings and food stores of humans free of mice and rats, which were a plague.
Then the next question: what do you think will happen if the Earth humans continue to indulge the madness of overpopulation? To exploit and plunder the Earth's resources and fish the seas, exterminate the birds and wildlife, and destroy the environment? Surely this must inevitably lead to destruction, because the weather is also influenced and disturbed by human madness, which ultimately, in addition to the normal influences of nature and cosmic moments, can lead to such an environmental catastrophe that suddenly no more water and food can be created. So I think that it can happen, as in various earlier times, that such a famine will again arise among people, that cannibalism will break out among them at another time, especially when droughts or endless rainy seasons, etc., destroy the fertility of the soil, and no more food can be obtained, as was the case in Egypt and other Arab countries in the past, but also among the Mayas, etc.
What you are explaining needs no further words, because you have already said the threatening things that may be true under certain circumstances, if the Earth human does not think of something better.
It is plain as day. Then the last question. It must have been 1946, if I remember correctly, when Svath explained to me that there are 2 different types of dark matter in the universe and in the material belt of the universe, respectively. He spoke of a heavy and a light dark matter. As I still remember well, he said at that time that only through these 2 forms of dark matter could the material universe and all the galaxies, suns, planets, comets, meteors, and gas nebulae, etc., be created. This is understandable to me, but Svath did not say how these 2 forms of dark matter form galaxies, etc. In this respect, am I right in assuming that the 2 forms of dark matter cause and go through very specific physical processes, and that they cause a change of matter, and, through rotation, a compression, and that gravity is then also created, by which an actual compression is stimulated, which goes beyond a normal compression. And is it correct that the infinitely existing electrons and neutrinos also play a role in this process, since they also have a certain mass and, under certain circumstances, come together to form rivers or streams in the space of the universe and also condense?
That can be confirmed, but to speak about it officially in an explanatory way from my side at this point in time would be against our directives.
I see. Our scientists are not yet ready.
That is the meaning of my words. But now, my dear friend, time has passed and I am back to my other duties. Goodbye and Salome.
Salome Ptah, farewell, my friend.